If you click this video, it's probably because you've seen Project Hail Mary and you're super curious to know everything they changed from the book into the movie. Or maybe you're a big fan of the book and you just cannot wait to watch the movie to know everything that's different. My name is Big Screen Bearcon, and despite the fact that this movie has not released to the general public yet, I have already seen it, plus I've read the book and listened to the audiobook. So I feel like I'm a pretty good person to tell you everything they changed. So if you really like casual conversations about movies, if you want to be the first to know the latest information in Hollywood, or if you just want a community that doesn't really care if you love or hate a movie but respects your opinion, consider hitting that subscribe button and becoming my movie friend, because we all need that friend we can talk about movies with. You should know that there are obviously going to be spoilers in this video, so please only watch this video if you've already seen the movie, or maybe you've read the book and you already know what happens. Now, to kick things off, it's important to note that's probably not possible to include every single detail from a book in a film adaptation. I don't think it's ever been done where a film or even a TV show has perfectly adapted every single line or every single moment from the book. With that being said though, I do think Project Hail Mary is probably the best film book adaptation of all time. They do a pretty good job being faithful. Of course, there are some things they changed that I think are pretty big, starting with the fact that the big overall blanket change they made is they dumbed down Project Hail Mary for the movie. I don't feel like everything is really explained in a lot of detail. It's kind of just like, okay, here's what's happening, here's the result, that's what it is. There's something brilliant about the book where everything was so authentically scientific and anyone still was able to comprehend it beautifully. It truly made you feel like the smartest person in the world while reading Project Hail Mary. So I just feel like the movie downplays that a lot. Now again, I wasn't kidding. There are going to be spoilers. This is your final warning. Let's start with the significance of Ryland Grace being forced to be on the Project Hail Mary. It's so much more than he was just the only person left available to do it. So obviously, he is the most qualified scientist. Yes, he was there for all the training. He knows the equipment. He knows all the details about the project. But he said no. He said he didn't want to be one of the crew members. And I feel like they could have easily replaced him. Strat literally is in charge of the entire world. He's every country's leader's boss. She had access to literally anybody. They could have easily found a smarter scientist, someone who was proficient in the field and was also an astronaut, and somebody who could have comprehended all that information, all the training, all the project details, everything in 2 days. They definitely could have found somebody. However, the movie leaves out a very important detail about why it really had to be Ryland Grace. Ryland is one of 3 crew members. The other 2 did not survive during their coma, because the coma is incredibly dangerous. And not just anybody can be put in that coma. It was actually something that was in our genetics. Every applicant, every potential astronaut, scientist, whatever, who wanted to be part of the Project Hail Mary had to have a coma test, which was basically seeing if they had this coma-resistant genetic inside them. It was a very rare thing to have, and it severely limited the applicant pool. And at some point in the Project Hail Mary project, Ryland Grace was secretly tested. That's why it really had to be him when the crew members died. And that's kind of why Strat really had no choice. Which leads me to the next thing. Ryland and Strat's relationship, I feel like, was also downplayed. They ended up having a really good and stable friendship, so much so that really Ryland Grace was the only person who could actually talk to Strat. He was the only person who ever really challenged her, and that's why Ryland Grace became known as Strat's number 2 in a lot of ways. Everybody knew if they needed something to get by Strat, if they needed something from Strat, they probably need to go to Ryland first. And that's pretty evident when Ryland accompanies Strat to Australia. Oh yeah, they go to Australia. That's probably the one plot point that's completely cut from the movie. There's no hint of that anywhere. And again, it all comes back to the main theme of their changes. They dumbed down the movie. You see, astrophage is a major part of Project Hail Mary, as you can imagine, and with astrophage comes a lot of problems and a lot of science that needs to be solved. One of the things they use astrophage for is to fuel Hail Mary. And you can imagine, to go to a completely different galaxy, you need a butt ton of astrophage. Way more astrophage than the movie leads you to believe. So Ryland and Strat go to Australia together in order to meet with a doctor who's kind of disgraced in the scientific field. He had this big idea to turn Africa into a big solar project, but because of him, things went wrong on the construction site and crew members died, which is why he's currently in prison, and they go to an Australian prison to go see him. Strat basically springs him out of jail, help put together the Africa solar panel farm designed designed purely just for astrophage. I mean, this is literally a continent-wide astrophage farm. Did it really need to be in the movie? No, it didn't really change anything. It probably didn't change anyone's viewing experience. But like I said, it is pretty much the one plot point that's not in the movie, period. Now, circling back to Strat and Grace's relationship, I think the biggest problem with them downplaying how that friendship developed is really evident in Grace's anger towards Strat at the end of the film. Because after Grace remembers that it's her fault that he's there, he didn't want to be there, he was never actually brave, he was forced against his will, he is super angry. He sits in that anger for a hot minute. Kind of feels like his only motivation to go back to Earth is to really give it to Strat. And that's something he never really resolves in the book. In the movie, they do make it feel like he understands Strat's decision and he forgives her, which is fine, but again, we didn't really get to sit with his anger all that well. He kind of feels like he forgives her pretty easily. That whole scene where Strat is watching his video diaries and that little cheeky message he leaves her, none of that is in the book. In fact, we don't even know if Strat's still alive at that point. I didn't really like the change of having Ryland seemingly forgive Strat, but I do understand why they made that decision. Ultimately, the ending of Project Hail Mary doesn't really tie up a lot of things like a traditional story would. I see this as an attempt for them to tie up character relationships. They were trying to make something work. I just don't know if there was ever really anything that would have made it work. Again, just being honest with you, the ending of the Project Hail Mary book is the weakest part of the book. It is somewhat unsatisfying in a few ways, and after I read it both times, I was just kind of like, I guess it's done now. Regardless, I do love that Rocky and Grace do end up together on Arid. It's just another change they made. Grace never really has the choice to go back to Earth. That's not really an option. When he goes and he saves Rocky and then he goes and lives his life on Arid, he is living his life on Arid. Did they come up with a way to have enough astrophage to send him back to Earth? I think so. But again, it's not an option that's presented in the book, while in the movie, it's kind of left open-ended on whether or not he will take the opportunity to go home or not. Something I was really nervous that they weren't going to have in the movie, because I was watching the film and I was thinking, okay, we probably should have addressed this by now, were the Beatles. Now, of course, if you've seen the movie, you know that the Beatles are in fact in the film. But again, another thing that's kind of dumbed down and downplayed. The Beatles actually have a bigger role in the story than the movie leads on. In the movie, he sends back all 4 Beatles. Well, really, they only needed 1 Beatle to be sent back. The other 3 were kind of a failsafe, which really comes in handy when they have astrophage problems on the Project Hail Mary, and the Beatles kind of save them a little bit. The Beatles need fuel to get back home, so Ryland and Rocky are able to utilize the Beatles' astrophage to solve their fuel problems when they run into them in the book, which also doesn't really happen that much in the movie. Now, lastly, the change I want to talk about is Rocky itself. Now, Rocky is 87% accurately represented in the film. He's done very well. He's honestly the GOAT. But I will say in the book, it actually feels like he's sassier. He definitely starts off happy-go-lucky with Ryland. They have a great friendship, but as time goes on, you can feel his patience wearing out and the sass really pouring in, which is natural when you're with somebody for a long period of time in close quarters. By minimizing Rocky's sass, he is less funny. He's still hilarious in the movie, so that's not really something you should worry about if you haven't seen the movie yet. The moment they didn't have in the movie that I was actually kind of looking forward to, because I thought it was hilarious, when you think Rocky's dead, Grace just kind of lets him be in the movie, just kind of lets him do his thing. In the book, Grace is chaotically trying to figure out how to save him. Something he notices that there's this kind of black soot coming out of Rocky's body. He develops this contraption to basically blow a significant amount of air onto Rocky's body to vent out the black soot. And he's successful, and Rocky comes alive shortly after that. So you think, oh my gosh, Ryland Grace saved Rocky. Just like Rocky saved Ryland. But in reality, Iridians have this eternal healing system, and that black soot was actually healing Rocky, and really Grace was killing him. In fact, he would have killed him if he had thought to get rid of the black soot a little bit earlier. Thankfully, he did it at a point where Rocky really already healed for the most part. And then when Rocky wakes up and realizes what Grace has done, he asks Grace about his sleep, because something that Grace does throughout the book is he makes a lot of mistakes purely because he just hasn't slept that much. So Rocky understands that when humans no sleep, humans stupid. He loves to remind Grace that. Something he does like once or twice in the movie, but not nearly as much and not nearly as effectively as he does in the book. Those are all the big changes I really can remember from the movie. Again, I'm sure there are a lot of other changes that happen, and if you notice something that I didn't mention and you've seen the movie, please go in the comments below and let me know. Like I said, I want to be your movie friend. I want this to be a community, and if you want to be part of that community, you got to participate in the conversation.